Hi, I'm Steve Adebayo. Welcome to One-on-One from the Newark Museum, where we're talking to some fascinating people about this city of Newark, Brick City, and the impact it's having not only on the state, but on this region, possibly on the nation. We're joined by John W. Johnson, Jr., Executive Director of Newark Celebration 350. Good to see you.
Good to see you.
Now let's tell folks what Newark Celebration 350 actually is.
Newark Celebration 350 is a year-long event, year-long celebration, where we will reintroduce to some and introduce the others the rich history of this city. We want to celebrate the city's rich artistic, cultural, musical, intellectual achievements, celebrate the people that brought them to fruition, and really change the narrative of the city. And so folks in the city, in the region, and indeed the nation can have a different understanding of Newark.
Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in the South Ward.
Yeah, let's tell folks. So we were just talking before we got on the air. I grew up, so interesting. I grew up in the northern end of the city. You grew up in the south end of the city. There are 5 wards in the city. Describe the neighborhood you grew up in.
Yates Avenue. It was Hawthorne Avenue was the main thoroughfare that ran close to my block. It was a pretty cool neighborhood.
It was a residential community.
Correct. Multi-family homes, to be sure. Everyone knew each other. A lot of folks from the South who migrated to Newark, became homeowners, and staked a claim in the city. There were a lot of small little corner shops, Miss Connie's Market, where my mom would go and get liver. I never ate it. And then not too far from there was Bragman's Deli, where we'd go and get our sandwiches. So.
Interesting. You went to St. Benedicts Prep, a extraordinary institution here. You chose that route. I said to you, I went to Essex Catholic High School in Newark, a high school that does not even exist anymore because of the financial problems it had. We obviously did not go to school at the same time. I went to high school after you did. What do you have to laugh like that for?
I believe you.
But what's interesting is that St. Benedict's experience had a big impact on you, and it continues to have a big impact on a lot of young men in the city. Describe it.
Well, the mission of the school was to educate, remains to be sure, to educate students from the community and from the surrounding area, and to instill this idea of brotherhood. You know, it's a different mission than most other schools, I believe. It's really predicated on building relationships and building a sense of community. I think Father Edwin and
Father Edwin Leahy, the headmaster.
Correct, yes. Father Edwin is an excellent gentleman, had vision to bring in faculty and staff who could connect with the students and really demand that we be perfect. And, you know, perfection was the goal, but excellence was
Did it change your life?
Oh, indeed, indeed.
You got a PhD from Rutgers.
Correct.
You did in American Studies. You did your dissertation on?
The Weequahic section of Newark.
The Weequahic section of Newark, another section of the city. Why are you so obsessed in a healthy way with this city?
Well, this is where my mother and my father migrated to so many years ago.
From?
From rural South Carolina, a little town called Rembert, one stoplight, a post office, and maybe a general store. And they planted roots here, and they sought opportunities, and at the time there were plenty of opportunities for them. And so I thought it was necessary to tell their story, to tell the story of the community to which they moved, and to look at why that community changed over time.
You know, this celebration, 350 celebration, what strikes me is that the future of the city is so tied to talented young men and women who have history and roots in this city, staying connected to this city, as opposed to that age-old expression we hear in a lot of urban communities, whether it be Detroit or Chicago or certain sections of New York City or wherever else. He or she succeeded because they, quote unquote, got out. That's not your story.
No. I think...
How do we keep them?
That's an interesting question. I think the major thing is to show that there are opportunities here, and I think it takes a creative mind. But I think it also requires that those like myself and others who are choosing to stay here don't follow or don't believe in that age-old narrative that has been told since 1967.
Got to get out after the riots or the rebellion, however one chooses to describe it. You got to get out.
Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that we want to do with Newark Celebration 350 is to show why some people stayed and why some people decided to change what was going on. I mean, if you think about the community development corporations around the city, Ironbound Community Corporations, New Community, La Casa de Don Pedro. When Newark was going through a lot of its struggles, these organizations kept the community stable enough for us to really see the development that is taking place now. And, you know, growing up here, you know, it's kind of that it is what it is. You know, I never valued the city in ways that people from the outside may have viewed the city. And so for me, this was a beautiful place. I attended church at Metropolitan Baptist Church up until a point in time. It was the old Oheb Shalom Synagogue on Prince Street. And while there were abandoned buildings around there from people and stores that had left, I never thought of it as, you know, blighted area. Those are old buildings. That's an interesting sign of Coca-Cola or knee-high soda. And for me, it became part of my historical memory. It was later on that I realized, oh, there were a set of laws that created the situations that led to this. Of course, there was the uprisings in '67, but I didn't have the hate or the disgust that some people may feel for the city. It was a beautiful place. And I think going to St. Benedict's also inculcated this idea that I have a responsibility. My brothers, we all had a responsibility to make changes, to be invested in our communities.
This Newark Celebration 350, as you recognize and celebrate the great things about the city, how do you do that with the backdrop and being aware of the violent crime, the reality of violent crime?
Interesting question. I think part of it is to tell the stories of resiliency, and to refocus and reframe it. You know, this is a celebratory year, and I think a lot of folks may say, well, you have nothing to celebrate because there are so many bad things taking place, but I would argue differently. There is violence and there's crime, but I think that's a national problem, and I think that's something that impacts cities like Newark. You mentioned Baltimore. You mentioned Chicago. You mentioned Detroit. I would also put Baltimore in the same vein.
And Chicago, all over the place, everywhere.
Yeah, these are national patterns, and I think those that want to see people that are oppressed and put down wallow in that. And I think what we want to do is to show that we have something to be proud of, that despite it all, we are still here. That despite all of the things that are taking place, there are people that are invested in making the communities better. And Newark Celebration 350 is giving those groups and those individuals opportunities to tell their story, to tell their narrative.
In every community, and in all the 5 wards. Real quick, before I let you out of here, how are you getting into all the communities?
Well, early on in our planning, we had community meetings in all 5 wards. In those communities, we appointed captains, and they have essentially been planning and producing events for the celebration. Additionally, we've engaged the various organizations that I mentioned before, the community development corporations, and they're also engaging in the year-long celebration. And then we open it up where people could apply online to submit their proposals and ideas. And we received over 220 submissions. They're still rolling in. And about 125 of those we've decided to support. And there'll be more that we'll be including on our calendar.
Dr. John W. Johnson, Jr. is Executive Director of Newark Celebration 350. Fair to say a mentee of Dr. Clement Price, and carrying out the work, the vision of Dr. Price, because it was Dr. Price who thought, hey, why not celebrate Newark in its 350th year? So thank you. We will continue to celebrate, but also recognize the work that you and your colleagues are doing in this very special and important year-long celebration. Thank you, John.
Thanks so much.
Okay, stay with us. One-on-one from the Newark Museum, the iconic Newark Museum. We'll be right back right after this. Thanks.
One-on-One with Steve Adubato has been a production of the Caucus Educational Corporation, celebrating over 25 years of broadcast excellence. And by the Newark Museum, in cooperation with NJTV and 13 for WNET. Funding for this special edition of One-on-One with Steve Adubato at Newark Museum has been provided by Bank of America, PSE&G, Horizon Blue Cross Blue Shield of New Jersey, the Fidelco Group, Johnson & Johnson, Prudential Financial's Global Communications Department, and by Barnabas Health. Transportation provided by Airbrook Limousine, serving the metropolitan New York, New Jersey area.